was actually born in California, in the LA area. East LA, if you wanted to put a location on it. But grew up there till I was about 10. But we moved up here because my brother and I had asthma. You know, and Southern California is a horrible place to live with asthma because of the smog. And we used to have these smog alerts, and you couldn't play outside. And my brother had some pretty intense asthma attacks. So my dad decided we were going to move to a place that was much better for our health. And so we came up to the Northwest to get away from the allergens and smog alerts. Now, for us, ultimately, it meant freedom from sickness, freedom to play sports outside, and to live a completely different life. But for a 10-year-old, it was a nightmare to leave Southern California, the place that I loved. You know, I was a California kid, loved going to the beach and playing outside, and every day, the ice cream man would come by. We used to lay on the sidewalk with our ear to the ground, waiting for that ice cream man, friends and family and all that stuff. And so we moved up here. We were on the road on my birthday, which was a couple weeks ago. And so if you can imagine going from California to the Northwest in October, we didn't see the sunshine for 6 months. It was horrible. But I cried almost every day, leaving that old life behind. But eventually, I learned a brand new life, the life of a Northwest kid, where I learned to fish and, swim in cold water. Go out in the rain without an umbrella, enjoy the mountains and the green trees and stuff. And I remember that first spring when my mom said, "Hey, pack up, kids, we're going to the beach." I was so excited, And then we pulled up to Illahee State Park where there was plenty of water, and I was like, "Okay, Mom, where's the beach?" She's like, "That's the beach." And that's when I knew, man, this is going to be different. But now I'm defined by another life. I'm no longer a California dude. I am a Northwestern guy, and I've learned to live a new life. Now, as we come to Christ, there is a complete transformation that happens in our lives from our old life in the things we used to enjoy and do versus a new life, what we're defined by now. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today, and that's what we started to look at last week as we talked about our identity in Jesus Christ, being defined by the gospel message, which is that Jesus died, was buried, and rose again. And so that gospel message applied to our lives, that our old self, our fleshly life, was cut away and is now dead, but we're spiritual people now, a new creation, sensitive to the Holy Spirit. But also our old life has been packed away in the past. It's been buried. And so we move to a new land, a new way of living. We're freed from being slaves to sin and desires of the flesh. Now we're free to live for God because our old life is buried. And then we looked at last week that in the same way that Jesus was raised and ascended into heaven, now we who put our faith in him are spiritually raised to a brand new life, and positionally we are raised and seated with him in the heavenlies so that we are heavenly citizens, deployed on earth as citizens of heaven, as ambassadors for Jesus Christ. And so that's where we pick it up today. Today we're going to be talking about forgiveness, because our debt was nailed to the cross. And then when I get back from my surgery, we're going to talk about verse 15, which will be being set free from the power of the enemy, over our lives. And so let's look at verses 13 and 14 today. It says this, "And you who were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, having forgiven us all our trespasses." Jesus gives us victory over sin, we see here. Now, when it talks about you being spiritually dead, that you were dead, spiritual death is something that maybe we haven't really thought of before. It doesn't mean that you don't have a spirit, but rather that just as the body without the spirit is dead, so the spirit without God is dead. You see, when the body is connected to the spirit, we're alive as we are right now in this room. But when our spirit is separated from God, it experiences a spiritual death. Now, that happened because of what happened in the Garden of Eden. If you remember, God told Adam and Eve, just don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but everything else you can enjoy and so on. But they broke that command. The consequences of the fall is that God said, dying you will surely die, in the literal phrasing of that. Dying you will surely die. So you won't die right away, but you'll experience spiritual death, and then eventually your body will die as well. And so, as they ate that fruit, their eyes were opened, then they were naked and ashamed. Kind of like the show, Naked and Afraid, but they were afraid, but they were also naked and ashamed. So that oneness that Adam had with God, where he was never alone, became aloneness in sin. Where now, although he was surrounded eventually by his children and animals and all these things, he was alone. It's not the way God created us to be. Once having a continual connection to God, but now being disconnected, spiritually dead. When we do ministry with students from the Basque Country that come here from Spain, and one of the first things that they normally do when we go to camp or into a new home or a new situation is they're always looking for the Wi-Fi password. I was like, Wi-Fi? What is that? And then I realized that I is pronounced with an E, Wi-Fi, so Wi-Fi password. They're always looking for the Wi-Fi password. Why? Because they want a connection with their friends and family and the world through their mobile device. Now, God created us with a spiritual Wi-Fi need, a connection with Him. But sin causes us to lose the connection. We're barred from entering that network, and we no longer have the password, and so we are left with a device that has no connectivity. That's spiritual death. We're not only separated from God, but we're totally unable to return. God puts an encryption on that no man could break. When Adam and Eve fell in the garden, and God had barred them from the tree of life and kicked them out of the garden, He placed a cherubim, which is a big scary angel, not one that's like a little cherub with rosy cheeks and looks like a baby, but a cherubim, a guardian-style angel, and a flaming sword that went back and forth and blocked the way to the tree of life. And so man was now not only spiritually dead, but disconnected from any opportunity. And so sin causes spiritual death. And that's the way we were born into this world. Sin is the cause of our spiritual death, our spiritual aloneness, our disconnect from God. Here it uses the word trespasses. This is actually the most common word for sin in the New Testament, trespass. It's the idea of taking a false step or failure in obeying God's law. It's the idea of a deliberate disobedience, crossing the line. All our trespasses speak of everything you can possibly remember that you did wrong, as well as everything that you didn't realize you did wrong. Everything, all your trespasses. It also speaks here of the uncircumcision of the flesh, which we looked into that last week, and it sounds really weird if you're not used to reading about circumcision and things like that. But uncircumcision of your flesh is the state of spiritual death marked by a life that is enslaved to sinful desires, insensitive to the Spirit of God. We're born into this world spiritually dead, uncircumcised in our flesh, with the sin nature and completely without God. You know, if you've had kids, you know how true it is that we're born into this world as sinners. As even babies can be self-centered at times. You know, I think of all of our kids. We have had 4 kids, still have them. And one of our children, I remember this, we were sitting in the living room and we had white carpet and some potted plants, and one of our kids was in the terrible twos, and so we were watching as one of them was grabbing dirt and dropping it on the white carpet. And Marianne, she was like, "Oh, don't do that." And then came the look. That look of complete defiance, right? And as he stares at Marianne, he reaches over, grabs a handful, throws it down. You've seen it before, right? That rebellion. We're born with that sin nature, without a connectivity to God, and we might not even realize it because we've never had it. But Jesus came to this earth to save us from that sinful nature, to make us new people, spiritual people, and he opened the way to the Father that was closed. No sin could enter the presence of a holy God. But it says here that we were made alive together with Christ. Now, this word alive together is a compound verb that means to be together with and to make alive. So Paul was really good at coining new words, and that's what he does here. We are co-quickened with Christ. We're co-made alive with Jesus, is the way he likes to put it. We're alive together with him. In the same way in which Jesus Christ rose from the dead, he also raises us from our spiritual death by opening the way to life once again. Jesus becomes that password to connectivity with the Father. If you know Christ, you have life. If you know Jesus, you know the Father. And so through him, we go from that spiritual dead state of being disconnected and alone to being forever together with him. And so when Jesus died on the cross, something amazing happened there when the earth shook, and the veil in the temple that separated the Holy of Holies from the holy place, that veil that kept anybody from entering, and anybody that did cross that veil would be killed, except for once a year, the high priest would go there and offer blood on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. That holy place that had a veil, the veil upon it was embroidered cherubim. If you remember the Garden of Eden, what was there? What blocked the way? It was cherubim. But when Jesus died, that veil was torn from top to bottom, which is a miracle and impossible for man to do on their own. But it opened a way into a relationship with our Creator. Jesus Christ died and made peace between you and God. He brought oneness back so that you're never alone. But it says here, part of the picture is not only that we're made spiritually alive and now we have this forever connection with God, but we're also forgiven. Notice this word, forgiven. It means to show kindness and grace towards someone by canceling their debt of sin. Forgiveness. It's showing favor to somebody that doesn't deserve it and forgiving them their debt. Freeing us from all the shame, all the fear, all the guilt, all the consequences of sin. When Jesus Christ forgives you, when you turn to Him and you put your faith in Him, He makes you spiritually alive and He forgives you. He washes away your sin once for all. Your sin in the past, your sin right now, and your sin that you don't know that you're going to commit yet, all of it. He died for it on the cross in that moment. And so when we were dead, we didn't deserve salvation. But Jesus died for us anyway. When we were filthy sinners, as Jordan likes to say. When we were at our worst, that's when Jesus died for us. Look at this in Romans 5:8. But God shows His own love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. When we were still God's enemies and we were telling Him, I hate you, get out of my life. He looks us in the eye and He got on that cross and died for your sin anyway. Now, when we talk about forgiveness, it might sound familiar. And maybe for you, it's a little too familiar, if you know what I mean. A truth that you've become so used to that you're no longer shocked by it. A truth that you become so used to that it no longer has the same impact it did when you first heard about it. Perhaps that's where you're at. We're talking about forgiveness and everything Christ has done, and it's just kind of lacking that spiciness to it, you know, that edge. Or maybe you haven't fully received Christ's forgiveness. And you've kind of pushed this truth off because you don't want to live in freedom. You like hurting. I don't know why that is. It's kind of human nature, right? Have you ever got a sore in your mouth and you touch it with your tongue, you're like, ooh, that hurts. And then what do you do all day long? You keep touching it, right? Oh, yeah, that still it still hurts. You know, wouldn't it be smart just to put something on it, you know, and take the pain away? But for whatever reason, we're just weird, you know? When we talk about forgiveness, whether it be too familiar and you've lost the sensitivity, or maybe you're just afraid to cross that line and be healed because it means everything will change. You'll walk into the unknown, into freedom, and you'll lose the pain and the shame and stuff, but you don't know how to live that way yet. You know, God will give you the strength to step into that newness. Now, Paul gives us a really graphic picture for forgiveness that adds some spice back to your spiritual walk, if you will, brings the shock value back to the cross. When he says in verse 14, by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands, this he set aside, nailing it to the cross. Let's break that down a little bit. This phrase, record of debt, this is the only place in the New Testament this word is used, but it literally means handwriting. A record of debt literally means handwriting. So back then, this word was used to speak of, we could call it an IOU, in your own handwriting and signed at the bottom with your own signature. In a legal sense, it's a self-confession that lists all the charges with your own signature at the bottom, verifying its accuracy. Not only the charges you're admitting to, but also admitting to the charges brought against you. A record of debt could be seen as financial or legal, but it goes beyond the idea of just a debt. It includes the idea of hostility, that you're an enemy who has a record against you. Now, this record of debt that we had toward God is an IOU in our own handwriting. In our own actions, we've proven that we're sinners. Have you ever lied? Well, have you ever stole something? Have you ever coveted something that wasn't yours? I mean, all these things those are part of the Big Ten, right? We might say, well, I've never committed murder. Well, good for you. That's really, really good. But you've broken all the other stuff, right? That record of debt, it stands against you. And the legal demands based upon that document, if you've signed it and then the judge is holding it, you're guilty. And now you're going to face the music. That's the legal demands. It's the price that is going to have to be paid. So the price for sin, price for transgressions. I like to summarize what sin is this way, because we oftentimes think of sin as a list of wrongs that we've done, a list of do's and don'ts, but rather, sin is simply saying, forget you, God. I want to live my life my own way. That's why the Bible says we've all, like sheep, gone astray from our good shepherd. Each of us has turned to his own way. But we're told in Scripture, what is the legal demand for sin? What is the price to be paid? Well, in Romans 6:23, it says, for the wages of sin is death. Remember Adam in the garden? If you eat of that fruit, dying you will surely die. The wages of sin is death. But there's good news. The free gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. And that's where it brings us to this pivot point in the text. We've seen that we are sinners and we are condemned to die because of our sin. We are spiritually dead without Jesus, completely disconnected from God, our Creator. Totally alone. But Jesus did two things to cancel that record of debt, that IOU that had your signature at the bottom. He does two things. He cancels it and he nails it. So let's look at those two things as we wrap this section up. It says, canceling that debt. This is a term that was used by some ancient Greeks to speak of a whitewashed wall, where you take a wall that, looks dirty and so on, but you bring white paint and just cover it up and it looks brand new again. Or Plato, he used it of a blotting out of a writing. And if you have ever used whiteout, you know what that's all about. Or one of those old typewriters, where you take out the ink cartridge and then you put in the white strip cartridge and then you type back over the same words and it goes bleep, 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 and those letters disappear. That's the idea of canceling. To blot out, here's the definition for you, to blot out or wipe away, to obliterate any evidence or record. I like how David Guzik talks about this idea of canceling. He says, the idea is that something was completely wiped over. And in the ancient world, the term was used of a whitewashing a wall or overlaying a wall with gold. That's even a cooler picture. It means that the accusations against us were completely wiped away and covered over. We experience this every day when you delete something that you're typing or you lose a file never to be recovered, right? That's been canceled. Set aside. Completely destroyed. God has taken the document with all those accusations against you, which you signed, and he's ripped it up. That record that deserved death. And it says here, the second thing, not only does he cancel it and he rips it up, but he nails it to the cross. He did away with your debt by dying for it. Now, the Romans, for them, crucifixion was one of the most shameful deaths that you can give anybody. And so, therefore, a Roman citizen was not allowed to be crucified because it was too low, too shameful. But that's the kind of death Jesus died. Stripped of his clothes, ashamed, or at least they were shaming him, all on our behalf. When Romans crucified a criminal, they would put above their heads the indictment, the plaque that would have what they're dying for. And you know what they had above Jesus' head? It said, "Hail, King of the Jews." The Romans could say, hey, we're killing this guy because he claimed to be a king, and there's only one king, Caesar, you know. Therefore, this one must die. But really, that was actually the truth. King, not only of the Jews, but king of all humanity. The King of Kings and Lord of Lords was put to death. But when we think of the picture of something being nailed to the cross, an accusation, that's the picture, the sign over Christ's head. And when it talks about your debt being nailed to the cross, the picture is the accusations against you that you admit that you have done, and even the ones you don't admit you've done, but are on record, are put above Jesus' head. So when you look at the cross and you see it nailed there, that's your sin that he's dying for. It was once used as a warning to all those that would see it, but for us, it's used to remind us, why is Jesus hanging there? Because my sin is on that plaque that describes, I have walked away from God. And that's why Jesus is hanging there. And that's why he died, to pay the price. And when he died, he cried out, it is finished. Or to telestai in the Greek, which means paid in full. Those were the words he cried out as he died on the cross. Your sin, paid in full. Think of all the shameful things you've said, anything that you've done, things that keep you up at night, things that cause you to tremble, that you regret, and there's nothing you can do about it. All those things are written on that statement of debt and nailed to the cross. And so when you look at a picture in your mind of Christ dying on the cross, think of your accusations being above his head. That brings some reality to the situation. Your sin, past, present, future, it was all nailed right there. When he died for all those sins. J.B. Phillips puts it this way. It says, he has forgiven you all your sins. Christ has utterly wiped out the damning evidence of broken laws and commandments which always hung over our heads, and has completely annulled it by nailing it over his own head on the cross, taking that shame and sin and death on your behalf. Galatians 3:13 says it this way: Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a tree. Jesus literally became the curse that you deserved. 2 Corinthians 5:21. For our sake he made him, Jesus, to be sin, who knew no sin. He was sinless. He is God in the flesh. So that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Jesus became our sin on the cross. This great exchange happens at the cross. It could be seen as a legal substitution or a financial transaction or whatever, that which you owed has been paid in full. And now, Jesus Christ literally gives you his righteousness. And, I look at myself and I'm not righteous. Any righteousness we have has been given to us by Jesus, And so once we were soiled in our filthiness, but Christ gives us his perfect garment, full, white, and clean, to put on over our sinfulness. Now we become his righteousness. So as we conclude and ponder these awesome truths, just like I had to leave the California kid life and learn to be a Northwest kid, a Northwest native. So Jesus has taken you from your old life as an earth dweller and given you a brand new identity as a citizen of heaven, as a child of God. 2 Corinthians 5:17, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away, and behold, the new has come. Have you embraced that new life? The forgiveness of God, your new identity. Well, 3 things I want to apply as we're preparing our hearts for communion today. Number 1, experience freedom from death. How can you be sure that you're saved? How can you be sure that you've been forgiven and that you're no longer alone? Well, you can be sure, as John tells us in 1 John 5:12. Whoever has the Son has life. Whoever does not have the Son of God does not have life. I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, that you may know that you have eternal life. If you have Jesus, you have life. If you've called out on his name, Jesus, save me, a sinner. You've put your faith in him. You've turned away from your old ways, and you can know you have life. And you can live in the freedom of that hope. But secondly, experience freedom from your sin. Believing, receiving, and experiencing the forgiveness of God. I love Psalm 103. It's just one of those sweet spots in Scripture. You always have those sweet passages you love to go back to, that honey hole that you can... Winnie the Pooh's always looking for it, right? If you put your hand down in there, you're going to get something good. Psalm 103, verse 10 says, he does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. Praise the Lord. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his steadfast love toward those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far does he remove our transgressions from us. As a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion on those who fear him. For he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. He knows that we're sinners, and he knows that we're alone in this universe. But when we were at our worst, he died for us. Have you experienced freedom from your sin? Have you allowed him to take your shame in death? But lastly, experience victory over your old life. Experience victory over your old life. No longer return to the way that it used to be. You know, it's funny that when we become a Christian, and I remember when I was a brand new Christian, it wasn't long until after receiving Christ and feeling that forgiveness and freedom and newness that I sinned. And it scared the bejeebers out of me. You know, I thought, oh, dang. Am I going to hell now? Because I cussed. You know? And I started to learn. You know, that's why we need to come to the Lord for forgiveness. We have been completely forgiven, past, present, and future sins, but when we sin now, it's like hurting a close friendship. And so, what do? If I offend my wife, I don't assume that we're not married anymore. But I do know if I want dinner, I better get things right, you know. Happy life, happy wife. Happy wife, happy life. There you go. So, you know, with the Lord, when we sin as God's children, we get right. Father, I'm sorry. But imagine the prodigal son. If after being forgiven and being received with a great celebration, he decided, well, Dad, you know, I really love the fact that you love me and you forgave me, but once in a while I'm going to go out to that foreign land and live it up. Can you just keep my bed warm? You know, keep things good here? That would be a sad end to the story, wouldn't it? You know, you want to see a total transformation. So how can we experience victory over our old self? Well, I think the secret is found in the empowerment of the Holy Spirit in experiencing God's grace. God's grace gives us the motivation to stop sinning. And so what does that look like? Well, when I mess up, I come before the Lord, confess what I've done. And in that moment, imagine yourself at the foot of the cross. Christ hanging there for your sin. And whatever that sin was, you're looking at things you shouldn't be looking at. You said something that was cruel to somebody or whatever that sin was. Imagine it on that sign above his head. Remembering he's already paid for it, number one. He's taken the shame upon himself already, but realizing the shock of that sin caused him to die transforms the way you deal with sin. Transforms your relationship with sin. No longer are you friendly towards it, you know, saying, oh, it's okay, Jesus paid for it. But now you're hit with the horror of, what did I just do? Thank God he died for me while I was still a sinner. And thank God his forgiveness is true right now, but I need to get right. That's one of the great things about communion. It's a time to remember the cross. The bread, which represents his body. And the cup, which represents his blood. You know a great promise here? It says this in Lamentations 3:22. It says, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. His mercies, they are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. As we come and we remember the cross and the horror of what Jesus went through for us, we remember his mercies are new every morning. As you come here today, it's not like when I first came to Christ and sinned and thought I was going to hell again or something, but rather we remember the price he's already paid. And that changes us. It changes our motivation. Jesus hung there on the cross, absolutely alone, in utter agony, so that you would never, ever have to be alone, and that you would never have to experience the payment of death for your sin. Praise the Lord. And so communion is an opportunity to do just that. So as we sing this last song, I want to encourage you to, if you don't have communion yet, if you didn't get it when you came in, just raise your hand, and Brendan, I'm sure, will be happy to bring some out to you. We have some up here. And then, as we sing this next song, as the Lord leads, think of the body of Christ and partake of the bread. Think of his blood, partake of the cup. Get right with him. Anything that's between you and him right now. Let's pray. If you know that you need Jesus and you've never actually called on his name for salvation, maybe this morning is the first step. If that's you, pray this prayer in your heart. Jesus, thank you for loving me even while I was still a sinner, that you died on the cross for me. I receive your payment for my sin, and I call out on your name, Jesus, Son of God, save me, a sinner. I turn my heart to you to follow you all my days. I'm forever in your debt, forever a new creation, and forever forgiven. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.